McNamara is like a zombie. He has not said a word since the plane went down. He's just staring forward.
He's just out of it.
And for the first, day and a half, the pilot, Russell Phillips, was unconscious.
Oh.
Louis was okay. He just recognized that he had a lot of pain in his sides and back, and what he didn't know is that he had broken every single one of his ribs on impact.
This guy, that sounds terrible.
Right? So for the first day, they were circled by sharks for hours. Some of them as long as 12 feet. Now, none of them struck their raft or tried to, bite them, but he said that they would drag their fin along the bottom fabric of the raft.
Ugh, that's spooky.
That's fucking creepy.
Yeah.
He said that he thought they were trying to tell how dense it was before trying to take a bite out of it.
Huh.
So, the fucking clock is ticking.
Yeah.
So now we're going into the next day, the next couple of days, and when the sun is up, it is beating down on them. They have absolutely no shade, nothing to keep them from burning. But at night it is completely freezing. And I can't help but think, when you're out in the sun all day and you get sunburned and then you go into the air conditioning, just how bone chilling it is.
Uh-huh.
You just can't, you're cold to your core because of your skin.
Yeah.
That's exactly how they were. They were completely blistered. Their lips had swollen up.
Ugh.
And then at night, they were just shivering. And I'm sure in the mornings there's that moment right when the sun starts to come up and you start to kind of thaw out and it feels so good.
Mm-hmm.
And then, 20 minutes later, you're baking in the sun again.
Yeah.
And they couldn't even jump into the water to cool off because there were sharks coming and going constantly.
Yeah, fuck that.
So now we move on to day 8, and it finally rains. So using their clothes and some of the parts of the raft, they were able to collect a small amount of drinking water. And Louis was able to tear some of the canvas from the raft and create 2 small hats that they would all share between them to try to keep the sun out of their face.
Yeah.
By the 2nd week mark, they had gotten lucky and had some birds land on the edge of the raft that they were able to grab. This is so disgusting, but pluck, tear apart, and eat raw. And then they would save parts of it to fish.
Mm.
And they were able to catch some little pretty tiny fish to eat. To keep calm, Philip and Louis would tell stories and sing songs to each other. But McNamara, he just never kind of recovered. Like I said, he was a zombie on day 1.
Yeah.
And he stayed that way pretty much. They said that every once in a while he would have this recognition of where he was and start screaming and screaming. And at one point Louis even hit him because he wouldn't stop screaming. And then he would be catatonic.
Jeez.
Then after several weeks of being adrift, they hear a plane. And they're like, fuck yes, here we go. About fucking time, Air Force, let's do this. But no, a fucking machine gun open fires on their vessel, their little tiny raft, because it's a Japanese bomber.
Oh.
And it circles back and continues to fire on the raft. But for whatever reason, it didn't hit any of them. It fucked up their raft.
But they were fine?
Yeah, but they weren't hit.
Wow.
But now their raft is completely deflated.
Yeah.
And they are halfway in the water, and they're holding on to basically floating rubber.
Yeah.
The only good thing about that, though, is that Louis said that it created a flap so they could get underneath it at times. They could take turns kind of getting underneath the side portion.
Get out of the sun.
Yeah. But the most devastating thing about it is now they're completely vulnerable to sharks. And the sharks started attacking.
Oh.
At first, Louis and Philip were able to hold them off with oars that were connected to their raft. And Louis was even able to catch and kill 2 baby ones.
Oh, wow.
This man killed fucking sharks with his bare hand.
Yeah.
I just want to let that sink in really quickly.
That's intense.
In fact, when they ate those baby sharks, they said it was the first time they had felt full since landing. But the sharks keep attacking. They are super, super weak. In fact, all 3 of them had dropped down to under 100 pounds. And McNamara was definitely worse off than the other 2. He had started telling Louis and Philip that he was going to die soon. He just knew it. Mm-hmm. And they did all they could to keep him alive. But on their 33rd day lost at sea, Francis McNamara took his last breath and they wrapped him up and slipped him into the ocean.
That's sad.
As the days go on, they continue to deteriorate. And their raft does too. They're fighting off these sharks. I mean, luckily there's no major injuries that come from these shark attacks. it's a lot of ramming them.
And bumping them?
Yeah, and grabbing parts of their raft, ripping it off, pulling it down, things like that. And they're getting tired of fighting back. At this point, they're both kind of just halfway laying on this rubber piece, just thinking whatever fucking happens, happens. At one point, they reach this area of the ocean, and I've never heard of this before, but do you know what a doldrum is? I didn't either. So the technical term is the Intertropical Convergence Zone, but sailors call it doldrums. And it's this section of ocean where it's like near the equator, and the winds from the north and the winds from the south come and converge and kind of cancel each other out. So the ocean is completely still like glass.
Oh, wow.
And there's no wind anywhere. Apparently it's just blue like all around, and it feels like you're in a dream. It feels very euphoric. On July 13th, after 46 days at sea, a huge tropical storm hits that area, and it causes their raft to be lifted in the air on these giant swells. They're fighting, trying to hold on, but what they notice is that when they come to the top of a swell, way off in the distance, they can see land.
Oh, finally.
Right, but the problem is they have to withstand this storm, and it's pretty far off, and they can't, like, start paddling that direction because the storm is taking them all over. Matter. They just have to focus on not drowning at this point. Night falls, they hold on for dear life, and as the morning sun comes up, they find themselves right on the edge of Marshall Islands. In 47 days, they had drifted almost 2,000 miles at sea, but they were alive.
Wow.
They had survived a plane crash, broken bones, concussions, starvation, a machine gun attack, sharks attacks, storms, and now they've finally fucking reached land. But before they could make it ashore, a boat approaches, and it's full of Japanese Navy men, and Louis and Philip officially become prisoners of war.
Damn it.
So now that they're in custody of the Japanese military, they are immediately separated and questioned. Like, where did you come from? All of these things. When they don't have the answers, or the Japanese don't get what they want out of them, they put them into imprisonment camps, 2 separate ones. And inside these camps, they are still starved. It's not like they're like, oh yeah, finally, after 47 days at sea, we get to eat. No, you don't. And they're beaten repeatedly. Louis was eventually transferred to a very infamous camp. It's Neoitza.
Okay.
Neoitza camp. I don't know. I'm terrible at that. Well, this camp was known for its extreme, gruesome methods for interrogation and torture.
What year was this?
I don't know for sure. I know that he got into the Air Force in 1940 and pretty quickly got attached to the bomber unit. Okay. So I'd say like in between 1941 and 42, I think.
Very early 40s?
Yes. That's another way to say exactly what I said. So this camp, Neoitza camp, was so bad that the prison guards made the list of the most wanted war criminals, both in America and Japan at the time.
Jeez.
In Japan, they made that list because they were going against orders and committing horrific war crimes. I thought this was kind of interesting. At the same time that Louis was being held there, there was a Marine that was also being held there, and his name was Major Greg Pappy Boyington.
Okay.
He went on to write a book called Baba Black Sheep, and in it he talks about this scrappy Italian prisoner that would spend the evenings detailing like his mother's cooking and how good it was to distract everybody. And that he had just come from being lost at sea and had discovered that you could almost trick your brain in being satisfied after talking about food for a very, very long time. And it helped all these other prisoners out because everyone was starving.
And he wrote about in his book?
Yeah, he didn't name him by name, but he said a scrappy Italian that was lost at sea.
That's cool.
So over the next 2 years, Louis is transferred from camp to camp throughout Japan and is beaten every single day with clubs, belts, and other various weapons. Not only was he still in a state of starvation, but now he has suffered numerous infections and diseases just because his body is
breaking down.
Yeah, and he's not getting medical treatment, obviously. No. He was also extremely close to death several times just from exposure, because it's not like the guards were giving them blankets or reprieve from the sun.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, guards would play these games with the prisoners, like make them hold things in the air over their head for hours and hours, sometimes days, telling them that if they dropped it, they would be shot. They would also force prisoners to fight each other until both of them were knocked out. And once it was found out that Louis was a former U.S. Olympian, the guards had a fucking field day with it. So some of them obviously targeted him, like, you think you're better than everybody type shit, and just beat the fuck out of him extra. But some of them just wanted a foot race.
Okay.
Like, just really thought that they could possibly beat him. And why not? He's been starved for now 2+ years.
Yeah.
He's suffered, I don't even know how many broken bones and injuries. So maybe you fucking can. Good for you. What a big dude. But sometimes he would beat them, and when he did, they would fuck him up really good afterwards.
Yeah, I bet.
And if he lost to them, they would say, oh, you're not trying, you're letting me win, and fuck him up regardless. Then at one point, they decide that they could use him to make propaganda videos. So they're going to have him do 2 types of videos. Basically, one to show Americans, like, hey, they're treating us okay over here.
Mm-hmm.
There's no war crimes happening. Things like that. And then the other video was to show to the Japanese military to boost morale, basically saying, Americans aren't shit, I've been spilling all of their secrets, like, we're all a bunch of weaklings, stuff like that. So at first, Louis like, fuck no, I'm not going to be a part of your stupid ass shit. And they keep beating him. He refuses. Absolutely not. Then he realizes that the Air Force had to probably follow protocol and pronounce him dead several years back when he was lost at sea, and he thinks this is an opportunity to let my family know that I'm still alive. So he agrees to do this propaganda video, gets up there, then he just states his name, and he says, Mom and Dad, I'm still alive, and basically drops the fucking mic and won't say anything else. After that, he received the worst beating ever.
Yeah.
However, the guards decided they had to keep him alive for future use like this.
Okay.
Or maybe use him as like a bargaining chip. Well, in September of 1945, as we know, the Japanese surrendered and agreed to release all of their prisoners, including a now 28-year-old Louis Zamperini. After over a month lost at sea and now almost 3 years in a prisoner camp, he was able to go home. And when he got there, he gets this hero's welcome where everybody's freaking out because people thought he was dead,
right,
then thought he was alive, then thought he was dead. They had a funeral for him. It's very strange.
It's a roller coaster.
And in his brain, the entire time he's been lost at sea and in this prison camp, he's been telling himself, stay strong, you'll go back home, you'll start running again. Well, when he gets home, his dreams are dashed because doctors are like, your body is fucked.
Yeah.
You've got a lot of recovering to do and you just can't. I mean, he was thinking he wanted to go back to the Olympics. His body could not recover in that way. Not only that, but he had severe PTSD, as you can imagine. And his mental health was just... I mean, back then, nobody gave a shit about mental health in general,
right,
let alone for veterans. But he came back and was having severe flashbacks from the war, flashbacks of being lost at sea, flashbacks of the POW camps. Like, he could not sleep at all, so he developed some pretty severe alcoholism. One of the things he said that kept him awake at night is he kept having a reoccurring dream of strangling these particular guards at that really bad camp to death.
Uh-huh.
And whereas I might think, that's not a nightmare, that's redemption.
Right. Yeah.
That's vengeance. He hated it.
Yeah. That's...
because he's a good person and I am not. Well, in 1946, less than a year after coming home, he ends up meeting and marrying a woman named Cynthia. They go on to have 2 children, but at this point, his alcoholism is intensifying. His marriage begins to suffer, and Cynthia's like, I'm out, like, I can't do this. But instead of just walking away, she decides to take one last kind of leap to fix things and goes to this religious retreat, hoping that she can somehow mend this relationship. And there she becomes a born-again Christian and starts attending these evangelistic crusades led by good old Billy Graham.
Oh, okay.
Remember Billy Graham?
Yeah.
Well, after time, she's able to convince Louis to go to one of these crusades, saying that basically this is the only way we're going to fix things. And it